Everyone in the frontier feared the old rancher on the hill. They said he had buried his heart along with his family and hadn't smiled in 20 years. Travelers avoided his gate, neighbors whispered behind his back, and children ran whenever they saw his shadow. But one autumn evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, a tiny knock echoed across his lonely porch. Standing there was a little orphan girl with nothing but a worn cloth bag and tears in her eyes. She looked up and whispered, "Sir, I was told you don't like people, but I don't know where else to go." What happened next changed not only the old rancher's life, but the entire town forever. Stay until the very end, because this emotional Wild West story proves that even the hardest heart can bloom again through one simple act of kindness. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every subscription helps us bring you more unforgettable Wild West stories filled with hope, courage, and love. For nearly 20 years, the lonely ranch at the edge of Willow Creek had belonged to Samuel Boone, a gray, bearded rancher whose name was spoken more with fear than respect. Once, Samuel had been known as the happiest man in the valley. He had built his ranch beside his beloved wife, raised cattle across the rolling prairie, and dreamed of watching grandchildren play beneath the cottonwood trees. But a terrible fever swept through the frontier one cruel winter, taking his wife and young son within days of each other. From that moment, Samuel closed the door on the world. He spoke only when necessary, visited town only for supplies, and spent every sunrise and sunset working alone among his horses and fences. Folks who never knew his pain simply called him heartless. Children dared one another to ride past his ranch. Travelers claimed he chased away anyone who came near. None of them noticed that every Sunday evening, Samuel quietly left blankets and food outside the church for families too proud to ask for help. He never wanted thanks. He only wanted to be left alone with his memories. One golden evening, just as Samuel lit the lantern hanging beside his cabin door, he heard 3 gentle knocks. He expected a stray traveler, or perhaps a neighbor needing help with livestock. Instead, he found a little girl no older than 8 standing barefoot on his porch. Her faded red dress had been patched countless times. Her bonnet was worn thin, and she clutched a tiny cloth bag as though it held everything she owned. She swallowed nervously before speaking. "Sir, my name is Emma." Samuel said nothing. "The preacher told me you lived here." His face remained unreadable. "I know people say you're not friendly." She looked down. "But I don't have anywhere else to go." The old rancher's weathered eyes noticed her trembling hands, the dust on her tiny shoes, and the hunger she was trying so hard to hide. "Where's your family?" he asked quietly. "My mama died last month." "And your father?" "I never knew him." Silence settled over the porch. Samuel remembered another little hand that once reached for his own. Without another word, he stepped aside. "You'd better come inside." Emma stared, surprised. "I don't want charity." "You'll earn your supper tomorrow," Samuel answered. The little girl smiled for the first time in many days. Inside, the cabin smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Samuel served warm stew while Emma thanked him for every bite. Before sleeping, she quietly folded her blanket instead of tossing it aside. The old rancher noticed. For the first time in 20 years, his lonely cabin didn't feel empty. The following morning began before sunrise. Samuel expected the little girl to complain about ranch work, but instead she surprised him. While he fed the horses, Emma swept the porch, gathered kindling, and carefully washed the breakfast dishes without being asked. She worked with determination far beyond her years, never seeking praise. Each evening she thanked Samuel for allowing her to stay. Just one more night. But those nights slowly became weeks. The lonely ranch began changing in ways Samuel never expected. Fresh wildflowers appeared inside old glass jars on the table. The silent cabin filled with cheerful humming, while Emma baked biscuits using recipes her mother had taught her. She laughed whenever the chickens escaped their pen and named every horse, even the stubborn old mule who disliked everyone else. One afternoon, Samuel took Emma into town. The whispers began immediately. "Look who's pretending to be a grandfather. He'll send her away soon enough. He doesn't care about anyone." Emma lowered her head. Samuel heard every cruel word. He calmly walked into the general store, bought Emma a warm winter coat, sturdy boots, and a bright red ribbon for her hair. When they stepped outside, one rancher mocked him openly. "Didn't know an old man like you had room in his heart." Samuel looked directly at him. "I've always had room." He paused. Some folks were simply too busy judging to notice. The entire street fell silent. That evening, several neighbors quietly arrived at the ranch carrying fresh vegetables, blankets, books, and toys for Emma. Kindness once hidden had finally become visible. Emma looked at Samuel with tears in her eyes. "They were wrong about you." The old rancher smiled gently. Sometimes people mistake grief for cruelty. It was the first genuine smile anyone had seen from Samuel Boone in decades. Winter arrived early that year, covering the prairie in sparkling snow. One freezing afternoon, Emma found Samuel sitting alone beneath the old cottonwood tree, where two weathered wooden crosses overlooked the valley. She quietly sat beside him. "Were they your family?" Samuel nodded. "I stopped living the day I buried them." Emma gently reached for his rough hand. "My mama used to say," she smiled softly, "people we love don't want us to stop living." The old rancher's eyes filled with tears. No preacher, no neighbor, no passing stranger had ever spoken words that healed him like that little orphan girl did. On Christmas Eve, the townspeople gathered at the church for a holiday celebration. To everyone's surprise, Samuel entered holding Emma's hand. The preacher smiled. "There are miracles," he said, "that don't happen in churches." He looked toward Samuel. "They happen when kindness knocks on a lonely door." Samuel stepped forward. "I spent 20 years believing I had nothing left to give." He looked lovingly at Emma. "Turns out, the Lord sent someone small enough to fit through the cracks in an old man's broken heart." Many in the church wiped away tears. That same evening, Samuel officially adopted Emma as his daughter. The lonely ranch became filled with laughter once again. Children from town no longer feared visiting the old cabin. Neighbors gathered on the porch for Sunday dinners. Travelers stopped by for coffee and conversation. And every evening, just before sunset, Samuel lit the lantern beside his front door, not because he expected company, but because he wanted anyone who felt alone to know they would always find a warm welcome there. Years later, people no longer remembered Samuel Boone as the rancher without a heart. They remembered him as the man whose greatest treasure arrived carrying nothing more than a little cloth bag and a brave smile, because sometimes, the smallest knock at the door opens the biggest room in the human heart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes kindness can still change the world. Until next time, may your heart always have room for one more act of compassion.